Yes guys, welcome from me. Another quick blast on Championship Manager 0102. And I say quick blast because you can see in the title right there what this is going to be based on. This is more a case of I'm intrigued to know people's perspectives of this particular subject, because when this subject comes up on the Championship Manager forums or the Facebook group or the Discord group, it's controversial. It's almost as controversial as Wibwob. So you can see right in front of you on the title, Maderia, Maxim Tsigalko. Now, I want to know what are people's perspectives of these two players. What I'm going to tell you is my own view. It is my own view, and this is how I see it. And there's a few people that I think will agree with me on this, and I'm going to use a few bases from conversations that I've had with a few players that I play with. When I have solo games, right, I never use, I will not play Maderia. That's a fact. Maderia is not a real player in CM 0102. I believe he was a fucking editor or a researcher or something, fuck knows what, but he is not a real player, and because of that, I have mindset that, he is an absolute no-no. Now, you could theoretically do this next thing, which I have done in the past. I just delete him out of the database. Delete him out of the database, so he's not on it. However, there is a reason I kept him on the database, and I'll explain that in a moment. Now, Maxim Tsigalko, I tend to have the very same, I used to have the same philosophy about Maxim Tsigalko, we all know Tsigalko is an absolute monster of a striker. And I used to, like I say, sort of have the same perspective that Tsigalko, I'm not going to call him a cheap player, because unlike Maderia, Maxim Tsigalko is a proper player. And you can see that on Wikipedia or on any sort of research sports website. However, and I had the conversation recently with my brother Baz, and a conversation with Gary, who I have a heads-up network game with, and that is, well, you can't make him off limits in purchasing him because he is a real player. And the bottom line is, right, if you're not going to buy Tsigalko because he's overpowered or he's too good, then there's a whole load of players that you should make that too. Realistically, Mike Duff, Mark Kerr, Kennedy Bakaruga, there's lots. So, and I've come to accept, that's a reasonable resolution. So now in any games that I do have Tsigalko. If you're playing as AC Milan or Roma or Real Madrid, realistically, you don't need Tsigalko, realistically, because they've got prolific strikers. So I've come to terms, I say terms, because, if I said I didn't buy him, I'd be a hypocrite, because I've bought him on my last few saves now, because, I've come to think to myself, you know what, Baz, Gary, you're absolutely right. He is a real player, he is overpowered, but he's no more overpowered in a sense than what various other players are. But I think when you play the 3.968 version of CM, where you've got all the overpowered Greeks, that's just a tad too fucking far for my liking. Papadopoulos and Skalidas, because people, I'm sure, there's people out there that are going to say, oh, well, hang on a minute then. In the 3.968, people say that the Greeks are cheats. Well, that's a different perspective, isn't it? That isn't just a player here, there, and everywhere. That is a whole fucking country of players that were overpowered. And just to reiterate, that this is purely my own view. So you probably ask yourself now, why don't I delete Maderia? Why don't I delete Maderia from the database? And the truth be told, I did. And then I think for whatever reason I reinstalled the ODB, and there's a reason I've left him in. When I played a network game with a Dutch friend of mine called Ray, and we agreed, when you have network games, you sort of have rules, a bit like when I have solo games, no Wibwob, minimum 3 at the back, 2 wide players, and we agreed on that particular game, there was what players were off limits. Now, obviously, the first player that off limits that no one was allowed to buy was, well, there was only 2 players, and that was Maderia and Maxim Tsigalko. So Tsigalko was off limits, and so was Maderia. But when you start a network game, right, you always, well, I say you always, I tend to, whoever I'm playing with, the plan is always to try and have a really long, successful network game. And when I say long, I'm talking of at least five seasons. In an ideal world, you want to just keep going on and on. Now, if you go beyond 10, 15 seasons, if you're fortunate enough to be that successful, Maderia and Maxim Tsigalko will of course retire. So Ray came up with this idea, and I thought it was a good idea. He goes, so we can't purchase, those two players are off limits. However, if we're playing this game long enough, their regens will not be off limits. So, you know, I think that was a very good call. So that's taken fucking forever to start up a new game, as you can see. So let's just take a look at how Maxim Tsigalko has loaded up on this particular game. I did it with a Maxim database, as you probably you might not have seen, but yeah. So Tsigalko, he don't look the bollocks, but you can see he's got massive attributes in massive positions for his role as a striker. You know, and you can probably work out now what are the best positions. What attributes do you look like for the best position? Well, clearly, finishing, off the ball, pace. That, for me, they are the three main ones as a striker. There are still a lot more. Clearly, there's a lot more. So that is how Maxim Tsigalko has loaded up. Now, Maderia, he will load up in most games. Maderia, I mean, he really is. I mean, you could theoretically delete him from your database and not even have the regen option on him as well. Going back to what I just said, so finishing, he hasn't really got the off the ball, but he's got the pace, dribbling. You know, he will score a fucking shitload for you. You'll pick him up for about £20,000-30,000. You know, whoever you are, I think pretty much. Low ranked teams, you will get him for peanuts. But he isn't a real player, and you know, as I keep saying for the third and final time, it is just my view, and everyone's got a difference of opinion on this. They say play the game as it was meant to be played, as it was, you know. If anyone's looked at the current update, there, let's call this player, Maderia, let's call him an Easter egg. In the current update, the April 2022, there is an Easter egg in that update. Now, I'm not going to tell you who he is, but the Easter egg, I call it that because he's an absolute monster of a player. I will be honest with you, he's not a real player. He plays in various positions, and he's 15. He is an absolute monster. His date of birth is the 1st of April 2006, I think it is, because I think he's 15, something like that. He's the son of the great Mark from the forums. Mark from the forums is the chairman of the forums. He runs the forums and the whole website, and his son was born on the 1st of April. So the updater has basically put an Easter egg player in the game as a sort of like, you know, like you know, I don't know, what's the word I want to call it? I was going to say tribute, that's the wrong word, but just as a gesture. And it took me a while actually. I found a player, I thought, fuck me, what a player! But he is your Maderia, he is your Easter egg. My own personal perspective, right, even though I've got these sort of players, I'm not a big fan of multi-positional players, because they're almost sort of like Stephen Reed and Lucas Neal. You know, I mean, let's take a look at what everyone's perspectives is of these players. I am intrigued. Lucas Neal, where do you play him? Yes, he's the bollocks for the bench, but realistically, I don't know. Everyone's got a different opinion here, but central defence maybe. He's got tackling, but he's got no positioning. Fullback, because he's got tackling and he's got pace, but he's got no crossing. I wouldn't have him in midfield because he's got no passing. I wouldn't have him, you know, I wouldn't have him on the wing. I don't know. You know, it's a difficult one. Stephen Reed, on the other hand, he's even more versatile because he plays as a forward. Stephen Reed, where would you play him? Midfield maybe? He does turn better though, to be fair. and you know, he's only 20, so I don't know. I'm intrigued to know about that and what your perspectives are on those two particular guys. Yeah, I think there was that. Was there another guy? Yeah, GX. Yeah, him. There is him as well, weren't there? GX. Was he former Newcastle? I want to say Newcastle. Yeah, he was. Of course he was. There he is. Fucking hell. GX Georgiadis. Although, where do you play him? I think realistically, defensive midfield. I feel for him. I don't know. I don't even know. I wouldn't fucking have him, to be honest. Not at the age of 29. So back to the subject in hand. Let me know what your perspectives are of Maderia and Maxim Tsigalko. I'm more intrigued, if I'm honest with you, to know what your points are on Maderia. Do you play him? Do you buy him? Do you buy him to sell him? Do you delete him from the database?